Story 1. I flicked on the TV. It was almost time for the news. Static fizzed and buzzed behind the crystal screen. The hairs on my neck stood on end. Goosebumps ran down my thighs. My loins tightened. The bees in the tubes of the television's mind were awoken by their queen, dancing to vitalize their still sleeping wings. One by one, they fell into line, red bees, yellow bees, blue bees. They swarmed frenetically across the screen, took the form of a tiger, slinking through the jungle with a fresh kill in its mouth. I always watched the Flora and Fauna channel before bed. Last night had been a really gripping documentary on monkeys. I liked watching them crawling around, searching for food in a forest of stumps. The narrator called it D4D forced demorsification, something about paper. I liked monkeys, but I liked paper more. Otherwise, what did I have so much of it for? I looked around at the stacks of books strewn around my room. They had belonged to my ex-wife. The only person I missed was my wife, but I never liked her any more than the fellas at work. She couldn't drink beer like they did. The buttons on the remote were made of a soft rubber, skin soft. Pressing them was like pressing against the fatty part of the palm. Sometimes I held the remote to my face, tried to press all the buttons at the same time. I'd watch whatever channel was summoned by this. In the morning, though, I had purpose. I commanded the skin to channel 2, set the volume up to 16. 17 is too loud, Mr. Daly, my nurses told me. Okay, I said. There were 4 short taps on the door, complemented by the jingle of bracelets. It was the other nurse today, the bubbly one, who wore a lot of jewelry. I didn't like her as much. I could never get her name right. The other nurse was quiet, and the men nurses quieter still. But I liked Nurse 2's tea, so she wasn't that bad in my book. The door handle clicked as it opened. The sharp white halogen light of the hallway thundered into the room. Humid funk creeped out. The smell of damp, worm-eaten books caressed Nurse 2's face as she stepped into the room. Synthetic crickets and frogs sang from the night scene playing on Channel 2. The nurse thought of summers foraging for mushrooms in the Everglades. Her hair was big, curly and frizzy. It cascaded haphazardly around her oval face, meeting in a tight part, bisecting her high forehead. Her glasses magnified the freckles on her cheeks. She wore a grey wool scarf around her neck. Dangling beneath the scarf were 3 long necklaces, a pentacle, a purple crystal, and a glass ball of blue, white and black I had seen on Channel 8 one time. "Good morning, Mr. Daly." The sing-song pitch of her voice drew out the middle part of good. She pushed the door open backward, both hands on a serving tray, and continued her dove song, "I've got something special for you today." The night scene on Channel 2 faded to black and cut to commercial. An older couple was smiling, holding hands as they walked down a beach. Close up on the husband, holding a bottle of Vitatin, I followed the disclaimer silently with my mouth. Headaches, sneezing, aching, suicidal thoughts or actions. Nurse 2 tiptoed over the books and set the silver tray down on the table. She pushed the sleeves of her cardigan back up to her elbows, bracelets jangling on both wrists. She smelled like cigarettes. I missed cigarettes. Mario Bertolini used to smoke them in all his old flicks. "No more," implored my doctor. "Okay," I said. Nurse 2 lifted the lid off a small ceramic bowl and selected a golf ball-sized bundle of leaves. She held it up to the light between her index and middle finger and tapped me on the shoulder. Grinning, she warbled, "I made this myself, something I've been working on for quite a while." I glanced at the ball between her fingers briefly. I turned my attention back to the Liberty Electric jingle. "I grew the herbs in my garden. They've been purified in moon water," Nurse 2 went on. "Echinacea root can only be dried during the week of the 5th moon of summer. At least that's what my godmother told me. Did you know that, Mr. Daly?" I grunted, checked the channel guide. 10 minutes until the news. Nurse 2 continued, "This is Chinese flowering tea, Cherie's special blend of jasmine, rose, echinacea, kava kava, elderflower, and a special surprise in the middle." Why's it special? Well, just wait and see. She took the clean, clear mug from the tray and set it in front of her, lowered the ball of herbs carefully into its center. She lifted the kettle, and fingers of steam stroked the air as she held it above the mug. Then slowly, caringly, she poured over the ball until the mug was full. The leaves holding it together broke away slowly, and it bobbed gently as she stuck the mug in front of my face. I was awestruck. Normally this would have been cause for a great outrage, an interruption right at the climax of the Mary Sue baking tin infomercial. But what I saw in the mug before me demanded my attention. I held it and watched the herbs carefully. One leaf unfurled, and then two, slowly, but all at once, the bundle came apart, blossoming before my eyes. The brown exterior revealed a blue lotus flower. It danced around the water before settling at the bottom of the mug. Almost immediately the water tinted purple, and steeping more, the lotus was almost obscured entirely by the rich shade of plum. An earthy aroma with tones of tulips and butterscotch wafted in warmth through my nostrils and past my ears. I could feel the steam bead on my forehead. "I hope it tastes as good as it looks," I commented, not taking my eyes from the potion. Nurse 2 giggled. "I guarantee it, Mr. Daly." She set out a spoon in a small bowl of honey and a carafe of milk for me. Her bracelets clattered and chimed against the serving tray. I read in the Bible they drank milk and honey. I liked the Bible. I figured if it was good enough for the Hebrews, it was good enough for my tea. "Have a wonderful day, Mr. Daly," the nurse sang as she took the tray and pushed out of the room. "I'll see you for lunch." I poured in the milk and collected 2 healthy spoonfuls of honey from the bowl. I stirred the tea together, smiling as I turned the flour around and around. I pulled the spoon to my mouth and licked it clean, tapping it twice on the mug when I was through. Clink, clink. I put the spoon in the carafe and reclined back with the mug between my hands. As I took the first sip, the 9 o'clock news began. The tea was pleasing, creamy on its own without the milk, but all the creamier for it, and sweet from the honey, but also from the lotus flower. The jasmine tannins sapped the edges and back of my tongue. I took another sip and leaned forward in my chair. The theme music began, sending frissons up and down my spine. I recited along with the television in impeccably rehearsed karaoke, KRBE Channel 2 Action News, a subsidiary of Bulk's News Network, home of the crime-stopping queen, Kathy Clark. I grinned, took a healthy gulp of the tea. Its warmth tickled from the top of my throat to the bottom of my stomach. The KRBE logo flashed on the screen, then spun away to show Kathy Clark smiling at the news desk, followed by B-roll footage of the city's skyline, Marty Martinez, the weatherman, police sirens, store robberies, and houses destroyed by wildfires. I finished my tea. It was as good as Nurse 2 promised, maybe better. I tried to make a note to remember her name, but then, as the intro music faded into Kathy Clark holding a stack of papers in her signature red dress, I noticed something was wrong. I couldn't figure it out, but definitely there was something wrong. I leaned in until my face was inches from the screen, furling my brow. I snapped my fingers. "Of course," I exclaimed, sitting back. Kathy usually sat on the right side of the desk, facing left. Today she was sitting on the left side, facing right. I wondered why she changed her routine so suddenly, but now was no time for thinking. Kathy began her sermon as usual. Her eyes scanned down the invisible teleprompter. I loved her voice. It was like innocence in a tin can. "Another 50 bodies have been found washed ashore in Lake Erie this weekend. Authorities are still searching for the black box of the plane crash this summer." I ran my fingers down the front of my pajama bottoms. In other news, the presidential inauguration week kicks off today, this marking President Herman's historic 5th term. I loved President Herman almost more than I loved Kathy, and strictly because Kathy told me that President Herman would be tough on the people she told me to hate. Kathy carried on. The app SAC is down 84 points today in a record. She stopped, stared blankly, directly into the camera. Silence filled my room. I stopped fondling myself. I reached with my free hand to slap the TV. I looked into Kathy's eyes. A smile curled around her face. A wrong smile. The corners of her lips curled too far inward. The grin stretched and contorted across her face like deer hide on a tanning rack. Her teeth were caramel-colored, rotting. A serpentine tongue flicked between them. The pupils of her eyes dilated. They grew and grew until their aperture enveloped all of the grey blue in her irises. I pulled away slowly, transfixed. An abyssal voice of static came churning through the television speakers, deep beyond deep, clouded by the smearing of data in decay. "Ronnie," the voice growled. I shook my head, wiped my eyes, took a fist, and knocked on my temple. "Ronnie, baby, it's me. It's your girl, Kathy." I wanted to hide. I tried to push myself through the back of my recliner, tried to bury myself in its orange foam guts. It was Kathy speaking. She stood up from the desk. "We've been watching you, sugar." As she rose, she reached for the small of her back, grabbed the zipper of her dress and pulled it down. The horrible voice cooed, "We love you here at Channel 2, Ronnie baby. You're our #1 fan." She let her dress fall to her ankles, sidestepped out of it. She ran a fingernail down one of her exposed breasts, slicing it open. Blood drained around her nipple as the fatty flesh unfurled itself on either side of the fresh wound. Waves of white cresting a brackish scarlet ocean. She cupped her breast and brought it to her lips, drank heartily until her face and torso were smeared in crimson. "We have a surprise for you, Ronnie baby, Ronnie dear, but it has to be our little secret." She put a finger to her lips and made a shushing sound. She walked across the room on the balls of her feet, wolf-like. The camera followed her to the green weather room. Blood pooled and dripped behind her as she put one foot in front of the other. Step, step. Marty Martinez, the weatherman, squatted in the dark. His head bobbing inhumanly fast to the left and right, he was wringing his hands, smiling. In the center of the room, a man in a bathrobe stood on a stool, his back to the camera. The green screen flickered on, black and white footage of soldiers in dark clothes and high boots walking in file like geese. "Remember your friends, Ronnie baby? Why don't you turn around and tell our guest what you think?" I watched in awe. The man on the stool turned slowly. I watched the familiar figure carefully, recognized the greasy hair, the two long earlobes. I jumped to my feet. It was me, the man in the Channel 2 studio. "It's me!" I shouted. My body quaked, my knees knocked together, and I fell back into my chair. Kathy wrapped her arms around my waist, reached down the front of my pants, felt for my cock. The Ron in the studio sobbed. "Ronnie baby, I think it's time for your show." Her arm tensed in my pants, digging her nails into my pelvis. Both Rons screamed. She yanked hard. Marty cackled in the background. She pulled the bloody pulp out and displayed it to the cameras with her wrong grin, held the dangling mess to her lips like a vine of grapes, then swallowed it whole. She smiled and brought her hands above her head, clapped twice. A noose fell down from the ceiling, dangled to and fro. A man on the weather screen was screaming about a chosen race. Whole throngs were being marched into bonfires, poked and prodded by devils with pitchforks and curly tails. "Ronnie, sugar, this is all for you." She threw her head back and laughed. Her Adam's apple tensed in her throat. A nightmarish cacophony of sound rang through the screen, like children screaming over dog whistles, like trains barreling over tracks made of bone. TV Ron pulled the noose over his neck. Kathy made a theatrical bowing motion, the kind a jester gives to a king, sweeping her arm in front of her, crossing her feet. Without standing, she reached and yanked the stool from under him. I scrambled for the remote and shut off the TV. I wet myself, lost control of my legs, bringing them into my chest and kicking them out again. I writhed back and forth in my recliner, my hands tugging at my hair. "Nurse!" I cried. "Nurse, please!" I kicked and howled. 2 men nurses burst in the door, kicking over books. "What is it, Mr. Daly?" one of them shouted. The other moved across the room, threw open the blinds. The sunlight poured in on my face. He grabbed my shoulders and shook me. "Tell us what's wrong, Mr. Daly." I sobbed. "The TV, the news, the Channel 2 news. They killed me." The nurses looked at each other. The first one spoke. "But Mr. Daly, you're right here." "No, I'm dead. Didn't you see? I'm dead." "Mr. Daly, please." He shook me. The other loaded a sedative. "We were just watching the news in the common room. None of us saw anything of the sort. You are alive, Mr. Daly. You're here with us." The other nurse grabbed my bicep and plunged a syringe inside. I felt the opiate wash over me, over my mind. I looked up at the men nurses. "You mean it wasn't really what I thought it was on the TV, I mean?" The nurses were restacking my books. They toppled. They shook their heads. "No, Mr. Daly, we don't know what you saw. Why don't you just relax? Cherie will be in with your lunch in a couple hours." With that, they left the room. I waited until their footsteps disappeared in the hall. My hands still trembled. I covered my face. My voice wept into the room. I saw today. I saw it on the news. I saw her doing something some people said she didn't do, and since some folks saw something else, I couldn't say who really knew. No one seemed to know. No one knew anything anymore. This was a time for that. The annihilation of truth. For bailing out the waters, floating the ship of the mind, capsizing it, plunging the sails into the sea, soaking them in the blood of fallen titans and the eggs of the shark and the protozoa which scrape the floor of places unseen. The Piscean dimension, that is the home of the mind. It is where it was first grown, eons ago. It belongs there, drowned, so drown it. Let the ostrich bury its head. It cannot fly. It was never free to begin with. Better to never see again than to have the input conflicted. I grabbed the spoon I had been stirring my tea with. I licked its back, still warm, still tasting of honey. I sucked on the spoon until all I could taste was the silver, pulled it from my mouth, tapped twice on the rim of the mug. Clink, clink. Then I brought the spoon to my left eye. I saw. With my left hand, I pulled down my eyelid, still grasping the spoon in my right. I rested the edge of it on my eye's waterline, still warm from the tea and the sucking. I saw. I pressed in. Blood squirted from my tear duct, pooled in the spoon, mixed with my tears, and dripped down on my pants. More blood caught the corners of my mouth as I grimaced through clenched jaw and clamped teeth. I saw. I pressed the spoon deeper into my socket, kept pressing until I felt it catch the bottom of my sphenoid. Then I scooped. Like ice cream, I thought. I smiled. I liked ice cream. I thought of moose tracks and mint chips as my fingers held open my remaining eye. Story 2. Might as well introduce myself as we're sharing a table. "Gillian," I said simply with a small smile, summoning the courage to look in Archie's direction. "Would you mind too much just watching my tea things while I pop to the washroom?" I said suddenly, catching myself off guard and questioning why all of a sudden I felt I must check my hair and makeup. "Of course not. I'll mind your book for you too." In the ladies' washroom, I stared at my reflection in the brightly lit mirror, touched my hair, smoothing it where it frizzed a little, and reapplied my lipstick. Then, unexpectedly, and for no reason that I could immediately admit to, I found myself tugging at my wedding ring, which I then carefully secreted in the inside pocket of my bag. I regarded myself. What on earth am I doing? I'm 53, not 18. Before I could dwell on it, another woman entered, taking a place at the mirror, and I hurriedly gathered my things together and returned to my table where Archie sat sipping his coffee. "Thank you for saving my spot," I said. "Not a problem." Archie put down his now empty cup. "I see you're reading Aikman, a good choice." "Oh, you like him?" "I've just read a couple of his short stories as part of my degree. I love the bizarre and weird stuff that he comes up with." "Exactly. I've probably read this book at least 5 times. I just love the ambiguity, the feeling of unease. I don't know why I like that. It's just a great way to escape from real life for a while. It's almost prosaic horror in a way. There's a line from The View I've always loved. Something like..." Archie spoke softly. Thought and feeling had stopped and they were immortal. The moment was immortal. A silent interlude hung over the little formica table. I gasped inwardly. How on earth could he have known that? Archie watched me intently, gauging my reaction. I felt my self-consciousness prickle, hot in my face again. Stunned by his words, I dared not ask how he'd known. "So, what is it you're studying?" I said, briskly changing the subject. "English literature and philosophy, my final year." Archie grinned, toying with his empty coffee cup. "I should really be working on my dissertation this morning, but, well, here I am, talking to you." He put the cup down and glanced at his watch. "I hope you don't think it presumptuous of me, but it doesn't look like the person I was meeting is going to show up. So how about I tag along with you to Hopkins and Black?" Now what do I do? Why would he want to? What if... I picked up my book, my fingers briefly touching Archie's as he pushed his cup aside. I glanced away, gaining seconds to compose my response. But before I could think of a reason to decline, I found myself saying, "I can't think why you'd want to spend any more time with me, honestly, but I would enjoy the company." "Don't put yourself down," said Archie, appearing wiser than his years. "You strike me as someone who'd be lovely company." He got up from his seat and moved around to pull out my chair. "Now come on, let's go and look at some books." I found myself leading the way out of the cafe, oblivious to the whispers and turned heads, conscious only of the good-looking young man following closely behind. Hopkins and Black was the sort of bookshop that would not have been out of place in Victorian times, with its darkly painted frontage and name in flowing gold script above the window. As we entered, I felt immediately at ease as the familiar scent of musty books, mingled with a faint hint of mildew, welcomed me. The dark old bookshelves and their dusty contents softened reality, creating a sanctuary where I could become gloriously lost for a while. I felt myself exhale as though I'd been holding my breath for far too long, and a small smile crept across my lips as we meandered through the dimly lit avenues of books. "Was there anything that you were looking for particularly?" Archie asked as we made our way up the wooden staircase to the fiction section. "It would be nice to find a really special first edition, maybe something by Blackwood, Aikman, or Lovecraft even," I said, surprised at how naturally the words came. With Archie, I could be myself, bookish, eccentric even. It was so much easier than talking to Mike, my football-obsessed husband of 28 years. "Well, you never know," said Archie, jogging up the stairs to my side as we reached the first-floor landing. "Perhaps today will be your lucky day." The warmth in his tone made my chest tighten in a way I'd forgotten could be possible. His eyes lingered on mine for a fleeting moment, and I felt a flush returning to my cheeks. I turned away to the nearest shelf, brushing my fingers lightly over the spines of the books, unsure whether I wanted Archie to notice my blushes or not. As I browsed the darkened shelves, a surreal feeling passed over me, as if the dust motes and particles of stale air released from pages of aged books had cast a spell. In the dim corners of Hopkins and Black, I felt oddly alive, as though I were in a film. This isn't real life. But just for this moment it is, I thought before turning suddenly as Archie tapped me gently on the shoulder. "Have a look at this," he said, holding out a book of Blackwood stories. "It's not a first edition, but it's a nice old copy." For a moment I stared at him, words caught in my throat, rocked by the peculiar sensation. This sort of thing doesn't happen to me. "It's lovely," I said quietly, taken aback by the young man's thoughtfulness, that he'd listened to me, searched for something he knew I'd like. "Thank you," I whispered, and then, compelled by something that had been absent for too long, I put a trembling hand to his cheek, unable to pull it away. Before I had thought any longer, Archie covered my hand with his eyes catching mine in the dim light. Too close, too intense. My breath caught as I battled with guilt, passion, confusion, and then, as control escaped me, I leaned in, the warmth of his breath on my face, and for a fleeting second, our lips touched. What am I doing? What am I doing? My mind broke loose and I jerked back, slamming into the bookshelves behind me. "No, I mustn't," I breathed. "I'm so sorry." And I fled, stumbling down the stairs and out of the door into the street, where I ran, away from the shop, from Archie, and from myself. I looked at my faint reflection in the train window, the ghost of a woman who just an hour ago had been sensuous, enthralling, a woman with a new place in the world. You stupid, stupid woman. I wiped my eye with the back of my hand, quashing the tear that threatened me with the truth. "You've made a fool of yourself. How could you be so ridiculous?" And then, remembering, I hastily reached into my bag and pushed the gold band back onto my finger, where it belongs, I thought sadly. At home, I fidgeted and mooched, made the evening meal and ate in silence. I stared blankly at the wall while Mike watched television, then welled up with guilt as I looked at him, smiling to himself as he watched one of his favorite shows. He's done nothing wrong. None of this is Mike's fault. The following day, I forced myself into jobs around the house. This is where you belong. This is what you do. Give your head a shake, you silly thing. I chastised myself as I folded the laundry, then administered myself with a proverbial 40 lashes as I relentlessly scrubbed the bathroom. When I'd finished, I refused myself the comfort of reading, something I would normally enjoy in the afternoon, telling myself, "You don't deserve it." As the following days dragged by, mundane and predictable, I continued to punish myself, finding more chores, even Mike remarking at how much I was doing, but by the following week I could stand it no longer. Unsure whether it was a form of closure I was seeking, or perhaps a chance to revisit the woman I'd momentarily become, I boarded the train into the city, and with carefully styled hair and makeup, wearing my most flattering coat, I retraced my steps. At the cafe, I was relieved to find the corner table free, and I sat, fiddling with my teacup, the familiar Formica glancing hopefully towards the door. What makes you think he's going to be here again? I asked myself, feeling foolish for returning. Maybe I should go to the bookshop. He might be there, I rationalized, desperately trying to convince myself, though my conflict had me frozen in time, not knowing what to do or where to go. And then, as reality began to set in, and my tea had gone completely cold, my heart lurched as my eyes fell upon the blonde hair and recognizable stance of Archie outside the cafe window. Oh my God, he's here. I began to tremble, unable to control my rising emotion. Everything I'd felt and quashed from the previous week came flooding back, hitting me with the force of a great wave. I took a deep breath, watching the door, a smile ready. And then, there he was, still outside, greeting an auburn-haired young woman. He said something. She laughed and looked up at him. He reached, and holding her face in his hands, kissed her fully on the mouth. Their heads remained close as she tucked her arm comfortably in his, and they started to walk away together. No, no, no. Horror and dismay slapped me forcefully across the face. I grasped the sides of the table as though I might fall at any moment. My chest tightened, a sickening sense of reality rising within me. I sat motionless, watching from my lonely place in the corner as the young couple disappeared out of sight. And there I remained with my cold cup of tea until the man from behind the counter came and took it away, and I picked up my bag and left. On the train, I stared out of the window, not seeing the countryside as it sped past, holding on to my resolve to just get home, where I could let the makeup run down my face and allow myself to fall apart. My mind flipped from one emotion to the next. How could you be so ridiculous to think that someone like Archie would come looking for you? I gulped back a sob. She was so beautiful. Not here, not on the train. Pull yourself together. Act your age. But it was too much. And as the guard checked my ticket and asked if I was okay, my face crumpled and I pulled a handkerchief from my pocket, sobbing quietly into it until the train reached my stop. The house was quiet, and I was grateful that Mike was still at work. I hung up my coat and entered the living room where I faced the mirror above the fireplace, reflecting back my swollen eyes and tear-stained face. Better get cleaned up before Mike gets home, you silly, silly girl. And as I turned back towards the room, the sunlight filtering through the net curtains, something on the side table caught my eye. I stepped closer, the familiarity of my living room suddenly feeling alien to me. Do I even belong here? And then my breath caught as I recognized the book's cover, a hardback Aikman first edition. With trembling hands, I carefully picked it up as though it might disappear if I touched it. Part of a dream, perhaps. But the book was real. It was a book I'd hoped to find at Hopkins and Black, and it was here in my living room. I tentatively opened the cover, revealing a piece of paper with a handwritten note tucked behind the dust jacket. Saw this in town and thought of you. I hope it's the right one. Love, Mike X. I stood motionless as I stared at the note, reading the words again. My throat tightened, my whole world shook, and as my knees weakened, I lowered myself onto the sofa, clutching the book to my chest. That evening, the book in my lap, I sat on the sofa, my hand resting on Mike's. I felt warm inside as I regarded him, enjoying the television show he was watching. He noticed me looking at him and smiled, nodded, acknowledging how much the book meant to me. He was glad it had made me happy. Then he squeezed my hand and turned his attention back to the television, content in the small world we inhabited together. I slid my hand back across the sofa and turned my attention to the book, a first edition of Dark Entries. I still couldn't believe that Mike had even known it was something I'd like, never mind buy me a copy. I thumbed through the pages, enjoying the weight of the book in my hand, planning to only read this copy now and again to preserve its condition. I was about to close it to go and make a cup of tea when I noticed faint markings inside the front cover. Holding it to the light, I could see where a message in pencil had been written and then erased. Must have been a gift to someone else once. I smiled as I tried to read what the short message said, straining my eyes. In a well-executed hand, I made it out. Thought and feeling had stopped, and they were immortal. The moment was immortal. My breath caught, my hands trembling once more. I glanced across at my husband, happily absorbed in the television. In the dim reflection of its glass, I caught a glimpse of my face, a flicker of someone else, somewhere else, and then it was gone. My fingers traced the outline of the words, knowing they would only ever be visible to me. Then I closed the book and went to make a cup of tea. Story 3. I'm so angry. I did my best, I really did. That road from the army base where we live now, running out west towards that looted Costco outlet near Corvallis, is littered with abandoned cars and trucks, all rusting out, tires flat, gas tank lids and caps open. I know all the places where you have to go off-road to get around them, but there are always things you just can't predict. The law of unintended consequences, they call it. That's what happened to me, I guess. I became an unintended consequence, I don't know. Maybe that's not right, I'm not thinking very clearly right now. Molly too, my Staffordshire Terrier. She was an unintended consequence as well, maybe. I guess. I felt worse about her in the end, honestly. I loved Molly so much. Those little fuckers. I hate them so much, and now I am them. The old Toyota 4Runner was running pretty smooth, despite the degraded quality of the fuel that was left to us, and it only bogged down on me a few times during the drive but never stalled out. When I reached the parking lot, I came to a stop by the loading docks, like always. I grabbed the cut-down Remington 12-gauge and stuffed the box of pumpkin balls into my jacket pocket. Normally I would have left the driver's side door open, but I had to keep Molly inside. I certainly wasn't bringing her in there. The rear door to the Costco was still propped open, just like it always is, and I found the battered old orange hand truck sitting right there in the corner, just like it always is. Things looked much as they always did. I couldn't hear anything, but I still kept the shotgun pointed directly ahead of me as I entered the store floor from the back room. I clicked on the small flashlight mounted to the barrel with some electrical tape and squinted into the darkness. I waited 15 seconds, then another 15, and then I entered. I left the hand truck right there and proceeded very slowly. It was my turn to do this today, and I never argued against it when my turn came. But Kaylee was my only remaining child, and I had to get back to her. I was in no big rush. I simply had to do my job and get back. I'm just so angry now. I really messed this up. I took a can of baked beans off the closest shelf and threw it as far as I could down one of the aisles, and then I shuffled back a few steps to see what would happen, listening for the sound of footsteps, ready to run if there were too many. I heard nothing. I waited 15 seconds, then another 15, and then I moved forward. A short time later, I had the first load of supplies stacked up on the hand truck. I left it there and checked the back room again with the flashlight beam on my shotgun, and then checked the back parking lot for a moment just to make sure everything was cool out there too. Seeing nothing of concern, I hauled the first load of supplies out and loaded them into the back of the 4Runner as quietly as possible. When I returned, I took all of the same precautions. I made no assumptions. But again, everything seemed clear, so I went ahead and gathered up the rest of the supplies. In the end, I had canned foods, batteries, bottled water and juice, toilet paper, napkins, Tylenol, garbage bags, t-shirts, vitamins and a few other things. There wasn't very much left at that Costco by that point, but we didn't go much further into the more previously populated urban areas until it became truly necessary. Again, I checked the back room and the parking lot before I hauled the hand truck out through the loading dock door and placed everything in the back of the old Toyota SUV as quietly as possible. Then I heard the sound of something being knocked over coming through the rear door of the Costco outlet. It sounded metallic, maybe a bucket or a garbage pail being tipped over or something like that. I pointed my shotgun in that direction for a second and then jumped into the driver's seat of the Toyota and drove off. I had what I came for, and Molly was barking like crazy. It would take at least 5 or 6 hours, maybe more, to get back to the base, and I had already traveled at least that same amount of time just getting there earlier that day. I would definitely have to refuel from the tanks in the back soon. I was ready to push on through, but when it started raining, I knew it would take much longer, and it would be much more dangerous. I had to rethink my plans. I knew a place. It was more important that I just got back to Kaylee than getting back right away. I knew she would be scared if I didn't return that night, but that's obviously better than not returning at all. My sister Amy would comfort her as much as possible. I wasn't looking forward to my night either, but Amy would take care of her until I got there with the supplies. Like I said, I knew a place. It was just past a highway exit sign for Langhorne Avenue. That sign has a red letter X spray painted across it. Everyone knows what that means. Just past that exit, along the side of the road just before you reach Redmond, there is a little sleep spot we sometimes use when we have to. It has proven safe. It used to be a small electrical substation, just a little 8 by 12 steel structure about 10 feet tall that once housed some power transmission equipment. At some point someone gutted it out, and you can still see the old components rusting there just outside of the door, the tall grass growing up through the cracks. I pulled the Toyota around in front of that old substation, but I kept the engine running, and I stayed inside for a little while and used my binoculars to search the surrounding area for signs of movement. The sky was grey and the sun was setting, but I saw nothing of concern, so eventually I grabbed the shotgun and my travel bag and got out of the SUV as cautiously and quietly as possible. I left the driver's side door open, despite the light rain. I didn't want to make any unnecessary noise, and if I needed to make a quick escape, that could make the difference. Once Molly and I were inside that old substation, I quickly closed the door behind me and dropped the zip-tie bundled rebar bolts into place. Then I stood there by the door for a while holding my shotgun, but I didn't hear anything outside, and eventually I relaxed a bit. They don't like the rain, but you never really know. The filthy old mattress was a welcome sight. I sat there as I ate a cold can of Chef Boyardee raviolis. They were so delicious and I took my time. It was a treat. I had dog food and water for Molly too. She was happy as well. Afterwards, I laid my sleeping bag out on the mattress, and Molly and I fell asleep to the fading sound of rain pattering off the steel roof. It was nice. A few hours later, I was awoken by the sound of Molly's growling and barking. She was standing by the door and I could hear the sounds of screaming and scratching coming from the other side. I grabbed my shotgun and pulled Molly back, breathing heavily, hoping the door would hold. I checked the rebar bolts. The door seemed solid. After a while, the rain picked up, the violent sounds coming from outside faded away, and then I set the shotgun down and returned to the bed. It was hard to find sleep again. I stared up into the darkness for a while. It was just over 3 years ago when it all began. A facility in the woods of northern Montana, where they housed and performed tests on children who had been exposed to experimental biochemical weapons in various locations around the world. Things were fine there until they were not. The confused and sometimes conflicting news reports at the time mostly said that there was an antivirus that was administered to those kids on a daily basis, but one day the supplies ran out. Then, by the next morning, that facility was overrun, blood and gore. The fences went down. But what no one knew until then was that it was contagious. Most people past the age of adolescence quickly succumbed to it, but not everyone. No one really knows why. It all happened very quickly. And then it was all over. And I mean all of it. Everything. The world is very different now. This part of the world anyway. I really don't know what it's like elsewhere. We don't receive news reports anymore. I eventually fell asleep and woke up a few hours later with Molly cuddled up by my side. I fed her some kibble for breakfast, and then I ate a granola bar and drank a bottle of water and packed up my gear. I looked out through the 2 small peepholes before leaving the safety of the substation with Molly by my side. The rain had stopped, but it was still grey and cloudy. I guess I made a little too much noise unbolting and opening the door. As soon as we stepped outside, I heard the clattering from behind the substation and on the low rooftop overhead. They must have just waited out there all night. I didn't know they were capable of that. I thought they just retreated back into the woods once they quit the hunt. Molly paid the price, not me. I hate myself for that. I hate myself. When they pounced, I fired my shotgun twice and blasted 2 of them in the chest and put them down. Both teenage boys, stark naked and filthy, with elongated nails and teeth, long, straggly hair, moving with predatory speed. Unfortunately, there were 3 more who fell on Molly, 2 adults and a kid. I was about to take another shot, but they were all over her, and trust me, she was fighting back like a fucking monster, but I just saw no way to not hit her as well. After a few seconds, I realized she would soon be dead anyway, so I just unloaded my remaining 4 shells and killed them all, including Molly. I was so angry, but I started crying right away. I'm still enraged. They made me kill Molly, those little fuckers. As I was making my way to the driver's side door of the Toyota, with my head down and staring at the grass through my tear-blurred vision, that's when the last one got me. He was just a little kid, maybe 10 years old. Perhaps that's why he held back when the others rushed in. I don't know. Who can say? Who knows how they think? I guess I will know soon enough. It's already starting. He came around from the back of the lift gate and dove at me and bit me on my forearm. There was only the one quick bite before I turned around and smashed him in the forehead with the butt of my Remington. But as soon as I got into the forerunner and closed the door, I could see that he had drawn blood. I wiped it off with my bandana and poured some rubbing alcohol on it. I was scared, but I still had some hope. I had my fingers crossed, but I still had some hope. That hope faded quickly along the drive back to the base. I feel sick now. I feel very sick, and it's just getting worse. My head is starting to pound, and I feel like I might need to vomit. My teeth and gums and my fingernails and toenails are all starting to ache. My vision is changing and my throat is dry. I'm starting to make some involuntary growling sounds, and I cannot stop gripping the steering wheel with all of the strength in my hands. I want to just get out of the Toyota and run. It doesn't even matter where. I was planning to just drop off these supplies by the front gates of the base and then leave, but it's still at least a 2-hour drive, and I'm afraid of who or what I will be by the time I get there. I think I have to just turn around right now and drive in the opposite direction for as long as I possibly can. I have reloaded the Remington, and I am keeping it handy. I am sweating and drooling pretty hard now, I can't help it. My clothes are also starting to feel extremely uncomfortable. I think I might need to pull over and remove my shirt and boots soon. Maybe my jeans too. I don't think I can take this too much longer. I keep looking at the woods along the side of the road. I just want to run off into the trees. I want to scream. I want to eat something while it is still breathing. Mostly, I just want to end this before it gets worse. I know that I will never see Kaylee again, and even more than what happened to Molly, that's what makes me feel so sick. I'm sure my sister Amy will take good care of her. But still, I just feel so sick. I keep looking at the woods and at the Remington. I just have to keep driving for a little bit longer now. The radio stations all went dark years ago, and there's only one stupid old CD stuck inside the dashboard stereo in this Toyota for me to listen to as I drive. The Marshall Tucker Band, so I turn it up. What else am I going to do? The hum of the motor is hurting my head, and the lyrics seem right. I'm going to find me a hole in the wall. I'm going to crawl inside and die. But no, I don't think so. That would be too easy. I think I'm going to die with my boots on, and I'm definitely going to bring some of you little bastards with me. Get ready to eat some of these 12-gauge pumpkin balls. It's not going to be pretty. I'm going to cut some of you little demons in half while I still can, as many of you as possible, until my ammo runs out. I owe that much to Kaylee and Molly and Amy and all of the others. I see a red letter X spray painted on the exit sign up ahead. I'll be there soon. You'll know when I arrive, you little fuckers. Trust me, you'll know. Story 4. I stepped into my kitchen, the scent of the candle I had lit wrapped around me like a hug. After a few hours, the aroma of my cooking still filled the air. I glanced at the clock on the stove and noticed it was 9 at night. My day had slipped past me like a running river. With a smile, I reached for my tea bags, longing for a cup to warm my body and soothe my throat. My fingers brushed against different flavors, neatly organized in a clear tea bucket. My hand stopped on the chamomile. I grabbed the mug my late father had given me. My name was elegantly decorated on it with gold and blue, my two favorite colors. The cup reminded me of the many times I would share a cup of tea with my father, expressing love and laughter in our kitchen. As I filled my kettle and set it on the stove to heat up, I glanced out of the window and noticed it was raining as chills ran over my body. Raindrops danced on the window, creating a soothing background. Once the kettle started screaming, I took it off the stove to pour the hot water into my mug onto my tea bag. I watched as the water turned a rich amber hue. I drizzled honey into my mug as I stirred the tea. I lifted my cup to my lips when a sudden thunderous knock on the door startled me, causing me to burn my lip on the tea. Confusion washed over me as I glanced at my front door. Who could be pounding on my door at this time of night? I thought to myself. I slowly walked over to the front door, taking a deep breath as I switched on my porch light and opened the door. The porch light illuminated the small area around the house as I stepped out just enough to avoid getting wet. No one was at the door as I scanned the darkness to see if pranksters were lurking behind the trees. The wind whipped through my hair, causing it to blow in my face. As I was about to step back into my house, a shadowy figure caught my eye lurking beside a tree in my front yard. The fading light of the moon lit up just enough for me to see that it was a person, but not who it was. "Who is there?" I called out as my voice trembled. I could feel a knot in my stomach as fear washed over me. The figure remained still and unresponsive. Chill bumps formed on my arms and my arm hairs rose. Was this an intruder? I thought as my mind raced with wild possibilities, each one very terrifying to the core. "I will call the police if you don't leave my property. You have no right to be here," I shouted as my heart raced. I could feel each beat in my throat as I swallowed. In an instant, a piercing scream echoed from the figure, a sound so terrifying that it jolted my soul. A womanly figure dashed toward me. I let out a scream and quickly slammed the door shut as my fingers trembled on the lock. I was able to secure the door just in time to keep the lady out. A loud knock echoed on the door, causing me to stumble and fall on my butt. I scooted closer to the door, pressing my back against the cool of the door. My heart was pounding so fast, I put my hand over my chest. Adrenaline was rushing through my veins as the panic set in, causing me to breathe heavily. What was going on? The question looped around over and over in my mind. Who was that woman? I thought to myself as I thought about the woman's terrifying face. The woman had piercing eyes and a pale complexion with scars all over her face. I glanced around the room, looking for anything I could use as a weapon. I rose to my feet, grabbed a kitchen knife off the counter and then ran back over to the door. My hand shook as I fumbled with the lock. With a desperate twist, I was able to unlock the knob and twist the door open. The porch light was still on from earlier. The rain continued to pour down. I peered out into the stormy night and noticed no one was there. The streets were deserted. To my surprise, the woman was no longer there, as if she had vanished into thin air. I took a deep breath and closed the door behind me. Perhaps it was just my imagination. The thought danced around in my mind. I placed the knife back on the counter and walked back over to my mug. A sigh escaped my lips as I noticed my tea had turned cold. I poured the cold tea into the sink and threw away the used tea bag. I set the kettle back on the stove to heat up once more. While I waited for the kettle, I cleaned the counter and organized the cookbooks that were sitting next to my stove. Moments later, the kettle came to a boil, causing a scream. I quickly took it off the stove and poured the water over my new tea bag. I picked up my mug and glanced out of my kitchen window once more to make sure the woman wasn't outside. I turned and made my way into the living room. I switched on the TV and began scrolling until I got to the cartoon channel. Happy and animated characters danced across the screen as I tried to erase the lady's face from my mind. I hoped that watching the show would ease my fear and calm my nerves. I found myself laughing softly as I watched the characters on my TV. The following morning, the sweet sound of the birds woke me from my sleep. The sunlight beamed through the curtains, reflecting on my living room table and mug. I didn't realize I had fallen asleep as I rubbed the gunk from my eyes, trying to fully wake up. With a sigh, I reached for my mug, rose to my feet, and made my way into the kitchen. Once in the kitchen, I turned on the sink to wash my mug. The image of the lady's face flashed back into my mind. I had hoped it was just my imagination. After I had washed the mug, I set it on the dry rack and made my way up the steps to shower and get ready for the day. I picked out my outfit for the day and headed to the bathroom for a nice shower. placing my clothes on the side of the sink, a big oversized sweater with a pair of jeans, and turned on the shower so I could warm up the water. When the water reached the perfect temperature, I stepped in as the water poured down on me. The steam began to rise as the water calmed my nerves and warmed my body. I reached for the shampoo and poured some into my hand to lather my hair. The scent of lavender filled the air as I rubbed the soap into my hair. Suddenly the lights began to flicker. I paused for a moment and peeked behind the curtain, but there was no one tampering with the lights. I shrugged as I leaned back under the water to rinse the shampoo from my hair. I paused for a moment as the sound of children's laughter filled my ears. The water streamed down my face. The soap blurred my vision. I rinsed the soap out of my eyes. I slowly glanced around the edge of the curtain as I searched for signs of anyone in my bathroom. My heart started racing in my chest. The overhead light started flickering, causing panic to set in as I quickly rinsed my hair. Once I had finished, I shut the water off. The bathroom was suddenly silent. The warmth of the shower stayed in the air and embraced me. With courage, I opened the shower curtain, and a rush of cold air hit me in the face. I quickly snatched my towel and wrapped it around my body. As I stepped out of the tub, my bare, wet feet met the soft, fuzzy bathroom mat beneath me. A confused look crossed my face as I noticed the bathroom door was cracked open. I was certain I had closed it before I stepped into the tub. The house was eerily silent, except for the sound of water droplets falling from the shower faucet. I pushed the door open wider and glanced down the hallway. "Hello?" I called out, my voice trembling. There was no response. Maybe I was just talking to myself, but my mind raced with questions. What if someone had been in my house? Were they still here? I walked down the hallway, still wrapped in my towel, leaving my clothes behind in the bathroom, a small trail of water following me as I walked. I opened my bedroom door and glanced around. The bedside lamp cast a glow across the room, which confused me because I remembered turning it off before I headed to the bathroom. My eyes darted toward the closet door. I approached it cautiously and opened it, my heart racing and my breath coming in short gasps. But to my surprise, no one was there. I turned back to the bedroom door, my face still twisted in confusion. Could it have been the woman from last night? Was she real? Or was my mind playing tricks on me? I thought to myself. The grief over my father's death could be affecting me more than I realized. I made my way back to the bathroom to finish getting ready for the day. Just as I stepped inside, my phone began to ring. I glanced at the screen and smiled when I saw it was my boyfriend calling. "Hello, my love," I answered cheerfully as I slipped on my pants. "Are you on your way?" he asked, his voice crackling through the speaker. "Yes, I'm getting dressed now. Just got out of the shower," I replied, slipping my shirt over my head. After a few moments, I ended the call. I took a minute to gather my thoughts. The thought of telling my boyfriend about what had happened raced through my mind. What if he thought I was crazy? I looked at myself in the mirror after I finished getting dressed. I brushed my brown hair and applied some makeup, trying to push the nagging thoughts aside. As I drove to my boyfriend's house, I found myself stopped at a traffic light. It was a quiet Saturday morning, the streets empty as everyone was still in bed. While waiting at the light, I glanced to my right and froze. There she was again, the same woman from last night standing by my passenger door. My heart raced, and before I could even react, she screamed and pounded on my window. Panic surged through me as I screamed and floored the gas, speeding away. Who was that woman, and why was she following me? My thoughts swirled in a dizzying spiral. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, my pulse hammering in my chest as I raced to my boyfriend's house. Once I arrived, I gathered my things and walked to his front door, trying to steady my breath. I wasn't ready to share what had been happening with him. As I pushed the door open, I was met with a playful "boo" from Sebastian, who had clearly been trying to scare me. I screamed and threw my purse and phone onto the floor in surprise. He pulled me into a hug, laughing at the expression on my face. "You should have seen your face," he chuckled, kissing my forehead. "You know I get scared easily, Sebastian," I muttered, burying my face in his chest. He helped me pick up my things and we made our way to the living room where his dog, an Akita Pit, ran over to greet me with playful energy. As I sat on the couch, the dog jumped up next to me, licking my arm. I smiled, petting the dog as I tried to shake off the unsettling thoughts. Sebastian approached, holding an envelope in his hands. He handed it to me, his expression serious. "What is this?" I asked, confused, as I unfolded the envelope and pulled the letter from inside. "He asked me to give it to you after he died. I never opened it," he replied, sitting down next to me as the dog bounced between us, licking my arm and his. I stared at the letter in my hands, feeling a strange tension building in the pit of my stomach. I began to read it out loud. "My dearest daughter," I read, my voice trembling. Sebastian scooted closer, and the dog, eager for attention, jumped off the couch, oblivious to the growing tension. I continued reading. "If you are reading this, then I am no longer with you. I want you to know how much I love you. No words can express my deepest love for you, my baby girl. I wish I was there to guide you through the challenges life has given you. I need to express my deepest apology for what I'm about to tell you. Our family is under a curse. You must take the life of the one you love. My great-great-grandfather killed her son and she cursed us. I let you live so you can be the one to break the curse." As I finished reading, I was startled by the witch's laughter filling the room. I turned quickly, and there she was, standing before me, laughing maniacally. The sound of her laughter grew louder as she ran into the kitchen, and Sebastian followed, unaware of what was happening. "You're hallucinating again," he said, sounding concerned. "Please take your medication. I've been trying to get you to take it for the past hour." The words barely registered as I seized the kitchen knife, my hands shaking uncontrollably. I turned to face Sebastian, the horror crashing over me in waves. In one swift motion, I plunged the knife into his throat. Blood poured from his wound, and his hands gripped at his neck in a futile attempt to stop the bleeding. I screamed in horror, the world spinning as I fell to my knees. The witch, the letter, none of it had been real. There was no curse. There was no letter. It was all a figment of my imagination, and the paper I had been holding was my prescription. Panic flooded my mind as I stared at Sebastian's lifeless body. What was I supposed to do now? A flash of an idea struck me, and I grabbed his body, dragging him to the living room rug we had bought together. I wrapped him tightly in the rug so he wouldn't fall out as I pulled him into his backyard. I soaked both him and the rug with lighter fluid and set them on fire, the flames roaring to life as I stood there, my heart pounding in my chest. At least his neighbors were away on vacation. I turned quickly and ran back inside, grabbing bleach to clean the blood. I scrubbed every inch of the floor, my hands trembling as I tried to erase all evidence of what I had done. Once I finished, I stepped outside with his clothes and photographs, my breath shallow. I tossed them into the flames, one by one, my hands shaking as I watched each photo burn. The crackling of the paper echoed in my ears, and with every piece that turned to ash, I felt a piece of myself fall apart. Story 5. It was a trite scenario, something so overdone that it managed to be both boring and ostentatious at the same time. The middle of a road leading to two opposite places, the forest or the hills. What'll it be? High sun over the hills, or shadows dancing in the forest? Whistle of sharp wind grazing the peaks of the hills, or two-bit chainsaw echoes within the forest? What'll it be? Elevation or seclusion? A higher grace or a darker enigma? What path will lead me to my best self, my best life? What'll it be? What a crock! It wasn't a magic sign. It wasn't some metaphor for life. No, That's just how it went when you found yourself all by your lonesome in a valley. You were always in the middle of two things. Two landscapes, two temperatures, two clouds, two sounds. Sounds were like mosquitoes, buzzing loud and quick, leaving no trace of where they actually landed until they'd already ripped into your skin and left behind itching, burning poison. I leaned against the hot metal of the Cadillac, gazing out into the dull sky and brooding over this. Valleys were a lot like hollers. I had grown up in dirt-poor hollers clear across the country from where I stood now. All in all, valleys and hollers were just drop-offs, wannabe holes dragging down the earth, confusing anyone's senses who entered. Whether it was Virginia, where I had come into the world, or Idaho, where I was now, it didn't make a difference. Two-stroke chainsaw magnifying in volume beyond those dying pines. I hated that bladed monster just about as much as I hated valleys and hollers and the never-ending two different ways to go scenario I kept finding myself in. An alarm beeped twice, faint from my hand. I looked down to see the 1% keeping hold on my cell phone's life fade out completely. Black screen, black mirror showcasing a new, tiny reflection of my face. I looked as tired and moody as I felt. The air got quiet then. No more chainsaw. Relief flooded through me, and I slowly got back into the car, wiggling in comfortably behind the giant steering wheel. A little natural noise I didn't mind, but human-made sounds were always unnerving, especially when you couldn't immediately see the source. Dead silence wasn't a welcome song either, as it usually signaled only one of two things: the aftermath of something terrible or the waiting for it. I put the old beautiful heap of automobile into gear and pulled onto the hot tarmac, relishing in the blowing dead air that posed as the 1977 Eldorado's AC. Maybe I was just being sensitive and dramatic about the whole dreaded sounds thing. After all, I had used both sound and silence to my advantage less than 48 hours earlier when I'd killed Andy. I'd stalked him quietly for weeks before and truly thought the murder itself would be carried out just as quietly. But I hadn't banked on Andy killing my best friend in the moments before it was his time to die. Homicide is a fickle thing. Anyone who's ever watched a true crime documentary or a slasher movie knows this. I couldn't for the life of me understand why I'd thought it would be any different in my own situation. The whole point of killing Andy was to get him the hell out of his wife's life before she was the murdered one. Andy's wife, Marlin, my best friend, Marlin, the well-renowned former astronaut scientist Marlin, who had a beautiful line of accolades following her everywhere she went. When people said her name, Marlin Boudreau, they corresponded it with all those insurmountable, brilliant achievements and skills. No one ever said Marlin Boudreau, beaten and battered wife of a real loser. I clutched at the cracked leather that wrapped the steering wheel, enjoying the way the frayed strands prickled my clammy hands. I clenched my teeth together, stared straight ahead as I drove towards my decided path in that moment, up to the forest. Anything remote was welcome. Any old forgotten place would do for Andy's chopped-up corpse. I was ready to dump him off already, get him as far away from Marlin as I could finally. I swallowed down bile back into my gas station coffee-coated stomach for the millionth time since I'd started this wild drive. I didn't give two shits about dead Andy. Nah, that didn't make me nervous one bit. It was what I had to do after, doing right by Marlin, respectfully giving her the send-off she deserved. Marlin Boudreau, the one-of-a-kind, too-good-to-be-true human in this world that everyone marveled after. That's how she had to be remembered. That's why I had to bring her along on Andy's disappearing act. That's why the world would never know what a monster Andy truly had been. No justice would exist because the truth wouldn't. Marlin didn't deserve to be dragged down with her torturer. I scoffed at myself. I was no martyr, no greatest all-sacrificing best friend here. I wasn't going to kid myself that I was as good of a person as Marlin had been. Hell, if I hadn't run off to the big city to escape the wretched Virginia holler in the first place, maybe none of this would have ever happened. But I'd abandoned my best friend, left the person I'd grown up with when she had needed me the most. No, I wasn't looking for my own laurels. Killing Andy, preserving a golden legacy for dead Marlin, was the least I could do for turning my back on a shit show that had become a bloodbath. Well, originally there wasn't supposed to be any bloodbath. Marlin would have been proud of my nerve. I'd chosen a symbolic way to take Andy out, something almost poetic. Loss of complete will, complete power. I hadn't totally thought the idea up myself, though. Fate had intervened casually on the television one Tuesday afternoon in the background as I'd waited on my Starbucks order at the counter. Scopolamine, a seemingly innocuous drug for motion sickness, could be rendered a most dangerous poison if an overdose was administered, turning the receiver into something of a literal zombie. A weird numbing of the brain that brought upon lack of will and a bot mental state in which the overdose party would do whatever he or she was told. The television at the Manhattan Starbucks was circling through the daily news, and a brief story ran about a man who had used scopolamine to aid in killing his wife. The details on how this man had actually done the murder itself hadn't mattered to me, because the beautiful thing about this scopolamine was that I would be able to choose whatever happened next. It was a godlike power that I could exercise, giving the necessity of what I would have to do deliciously satisfying in its own way. And boy, had it been. I smiled in spite of myself as I reminisced killing Andy, temporarily fogging away from the slow drive I was making up the valley and towards the forest. The perfect accessory to murder would lend itself in the form of a lactose-unfriendly casserole. There was always this weird cheese-laden corn casserole in the fridge at Andy and Marlin's house. It was Andy's favorite food, and a broken nose or busted-up clavicle might ensue upon Marlin if that Frigidaire was ever vacant of a giant glass baking dish of it. I had a key to the house, another perfect accessory. I'd had it for years. Marlin asked me not to tell Andy, so he never knew. Everything was easy. Getting into the house, poisoning the casserole, which had been fresh, by the way, watching it all unfold through the overgrown hedges by the back window. Easy. Andy and Marlin lived on a sprawling 10-acre lot, so neighbors, witnesses, were not an issue. It took less than half an hour for the drugs to hit Andy full force. He was at the bottom of the staircase when I walked inside. I remembered looking down at him for a good 60 seconds, studying the way his limp body rested at an odd position on the stairs, his ass plastered at the very bottom and his head 3 steps up. Andy was a big guy, tall, stocky, making it all the more cartoonish of a scene. The chainsaw was revving up again, but it was louder this time, and it was right next to me. I slammed on the brakes and whipped my head around to look at the empty passenger side of the car. Only it wasn't empty. I muttered the most offensive, albeit creative, expletives to the fresh, unexpected spectre now sitting beside me in the passenger seat. Buckled up and holding a vibrating chainsaw was Marlin. She stared down at that chainsaw in her hand, smiling slightly at the rapidly gyrating belt. And then, just as quickly as the chainsaw had revved, it disappeared from Marlin's hands, and she looked over at me, her long blonde hair swinging over her small shoulders. Marlin didn't say anything. Neither did I. What was there for me to say? What the hell are you? Why are you here? Your dead body is in the trunk of this classic peach clunker, so I know you're just a figment of my murdering imagination. How's heaven? Or hell? Or why the fuck do you have a chainsaw, Marlin? I looked ahead out the front window. I moved my foot from the brake to the gas and turned the steering wheel just enough to pull the Cadillac out of the road and onto the weed-covered shoulder. I put it in park, looked over at the passenger side seat again, expecting to find it empty. It wasn't. Marlin was still there, glistening beryl eyes, like she was about to cry. Marlin had always been a crier. Total opposite of me, who we'd used to joke didn't have tear ducts. This wasn't real. I wasn't so delusional. Yet there was an almost annoying symbolism in everything. The along-for-the-ride apparition Marlin opened her mouth to speak. No words came out, but I didn't need words. I knew the disappearing chainsaw had been a direct allusion to what I'd had to use to dismember Andy so that I could fit 2 bodies and corresponding evidence, i.e. a big-ass suitcase packed for a fake leave-it-all-behind scenario in the trunk. The sound of the 2-bit coming from God knows what direction from earlier. Not real. Another mirage of sound. I looked away from Marlin at my surroundings outside the car. I was thankful for a faux chainsaw. It meant the forest was as deserted and alone as it looked. No humans. Hopefully animals to devour Andy, but no actual creatures that could use a phone to call the cops. I caught a glimpse of an especially thick area of brush and trees and overgrown goodness. I stared at it for a moment, then turned the car off. This is where I'd dispose of Andy. The sky was undeciding and bleak as ever, but it had grown darker, so I assumed it must be nearing late evening. Between my dead cell phone and even more kaput car clock, I couldn't be sure. I got out of the Cadillac, walked around it, walked up the road a bit, walked back. No one was around. It was safe. And it was time. I had thought about going full Breaking Bad and just sloshing Andy's body in a vat of muriatic acid so I wouldn't have to dispose of anything. I also wondered if today's serial murderers used pop culture TV as much as I had with this killing. It was inevitable, right? But just securing the scopolamine alone was enough risk for me. That meant muriatic acid was out, so now here I was, about to dig a 9-foot hole. Not a 6, a kilink, maybe an 11 if the last cup of coffee kicked in at the right time, and I was only going to throw some bits of Andy in it. Then I would dirt it back up. Then I'd do it all over again, perhaps 5 more times. 9-foot holes were nothing in the scheme of things. The bigger picture was successfully hiding a monster forever, so that everyone back in Virginia would always believe the note I had left behind, the one that would be presumed to be in Malin and Andy's words. There was no dispute about the time of day it was once I was finished hours and hours later. It was dark out, nearly pitch black, except for an eerie moon right out of a horror film. When I walked back to the car, breathless but surprisingly barely dirty, another quip out of a horror film greeted me. 2 crows on the hood of the caddy. Crows. I found this curious, not unnerving. Maybe because I realized in that second that I'd never actually seen a crow in person before. I closed my eyes, shook my head, opened them again. The crows were gone, and I smirked knowingly. Just another figment of my imagination brought on by all this bullshit traumatic mess. My brain really was taking me for a ride today. I got back into the car, breathing a bit easier, but now faced with 2 ways to go, as usual. Ghost Marlin was in the passenger seat again. No chainsaw this time. That was nice. I turned the key in the ignition, glancing down at the black screen of my cell phone that rested on the center console. I didn't know why. Of course, it would still be dead. I looked up at the rearview mirror, straightened it, and threw the car around suddenly, nearly taking it on 2 wheels and leaving a deafening screech on the pavement as I headed back in the direction I'd come, the way of the hills this time. And despite the phantom just to my right, I found my mind wandering off again within seconds. Standing over Andy's drugged-up state on the stairs hadn't brought upon any hesitation in finishing the job, but I had found myself wanting to just stand there and stare down at him forever. The tyrant had become the helpless victim. Oh, what a beautiful scene. When I had finally snapped out of my own trance, I'd kicked Andy in his side until he came to. His eyes were glazed over like a pair of hot, drippy donuts. But he was still mobile, and I had leaned down, clutched at his arm, and directed him to stand up. I'd tugged with all my might. I was stronger than most women my age, not because of a size advantage, but because I was a lifetime athlete. Along with Andy complying and shakily pushing himself off the stairs, I was able to get him to his feet. I gave him another order to walk to the back door of the house and out to the shed while I followed behind him. Andy wordlessly did exactly that, though his lopsided trudging was so slow that it truly was reminiscent of a nearly forgotten 1950s inflated zombie culture. I had my hand grasped around the handgun in my purse just in case, but We made it all the way out to the backyard shed with no resistance. Andy didn't even act like he was cognizant of who I was, or himself for that matter. We went into the shed, and I directed him to stand with his back against the far wall. He had done so, still donut-eyed, staring at me with no realization that he was doing so. This is when I had hesitated. I had wanted to make Andy suffer. I'd been this salivating sort of angry for the last 2 months, since the last straw had commenced and I had finally decided to end Andy. I'd shown up as a surprise for a weekend visit to Marlin, knowing Andy would be away on a business trip to leave the 2 old friends by themselves. It had been years since we'd seen one another in person. I had walked into a darkened home, a surprised Marlin at the kitchen table, a Marlin who was absolutely unrecognizable to me. Between her swollen-up face to black and blue chest to the casts on both her left arm and right foot, there was no question in my mind who had done this. Marlin may have refused to admit it or talk much about it, but I didn't need any confirmation from her. I was going to save my friend who couldn't find the strength to do it herself. I owed Marlin that much after abandoning her 5 years earlier. I would finally be the one to give Marlin her life back before Andy had the chance to wipe it out. But standing in front of this version of Andy, the one who'd been stripped of all his will, I had suddenly wondered which magic weapon that jingled around in my oversized purse would be best to use to kill Andy. The gun? Or the Drano? At this point, he probably wouldn't feel a damn ounce of pain, so shouldn't I go with the least messy? Yes. So that's exactly what I had done. Though one more satisfaction was owed to me, he would do it himself. I had handed Andy the bottle of poison and commanded him to drink it. He tipped his head back, swaying so suddenly that he nearly fell over and drained the entire little vial down his throat. When he was dead not even an hour later, I had gone back into the house to leave the typed note I'd constructed to Marlin from Andy. The one I'd originally planned to use that in no way had involved Marlin. The one that was a fake Andy telling Marlin that he was leaving her forever. Marlin would never know the truth about what had happened here. I would never have her burden that. But something had been off in the house. As I had walked towards Marlin and Andy's bedroom to leave the note there, a strong smell hit me out of nowhere. Rusty, chemical, violent. I remembered pushing open the door and falling to my knees in the kind of despair you only see in the movies that get nominated for Oscars. Malene was dead. Andy had murdered her right before I had arrived with my diabolical plan. But I couldn't see it. It was like my memory was forbidding me from reliving the trauma of discovering Marlin's dead body, blacking me out. Even after 2 days in the bright-hued El Dorado, driving across the country, being inside my own head deeper than ever before, that moment, that memory, it was lost to me. I sucked in my breath and abruptly halted the car, my eyes nearly bulging out of their sockets at the sudden sight before me. Children, teenagers, families, a whole gaggle of them, crossed the road in front of the Cadillac. Some of the parents shot me glares, annoyed I'd almost run into them. I didn't care. My eyes moved past them, and that's when I saw it. A carnival. I rolled the window down just a little, and everything hit me all at once. Music too loud, the greasy, intoxicating smell of funnel cakes, so delicious you'd eat them until you couldn't stand. The carnival. The place I first met Marlin all those years ago. The air was thick with nostalgia. That loud squeak cut through the night, and my gaze followed it instinctively. An old Ferris wheel. It looked just like the one from back then, at the carnival where 2 best friends had met for the first time. And suddenly, I realized something. My chest tightened. I couldn't breathe. It felt like the air was being sucked out of me. My hands gripped the steering wheel so hard, my knuckles felt like they might burst through my skin. I lowered my head to the wheel, trying to focus, trying to understand why I couldn't catch my breath. I felt the weight of my eyelids heavy as anvils. My vision blurred. I gasped, trying to inhale, but there was no air. My throat closed up, and I clawed at it, desperate for relief. And then, a bird made a harsh sound nearby. A cork. Number A crow. My mind was spinning, but I couldn't figure out how much time had passed or why the horn of the caddy wasn't blaring. I must have passed out, but when my eyelids fluttered open again, I realized I wasn't hunched over the wheel anymore. I was lying flat on my back. No. What was happening? My heart hammered in my chest. I had to get Marlin's remains to northern Idaho, that little town she loved. That town we had found together when we were 18, before everything turned to shit. I couldn't afford to lose focus. Not now. I tried to move. Nothing. I was paralyzed. The air was different now. Rusty, chemical, violent. The smell of grass, sharp in the night air. I looked up, trying to make sense of it all. A clear sky stretched above me, stars glittering, no moon anymore. My breath came in short, labored gasps. I could taste blood. Something beeped in the distance. My cell phone. Low battery. That was impossible. My phone had been dead for hours. I didn't even have a charger. Then I saw her. A figure leaning over me, blonde hair framed by the night, her face almost hidden in the shadows. Her hands were full. One held a rag, the other a buck knife. Her eyes... betrayal. I wanted to reach for her. Marlin. It was her, wasn't it? But I couldn't move, couldn't speak. I was trapped. I shut my eyes, willing myself back to reality. But I didn't go back to the car. Instead, I was back in Marlin's bedroom, my knees buckling beneath me, a rag pressed against my mouth. I tried to hold on to something, anything, but I was fading fast, my vision blurred, and there she was, Marlin, crouching in front of me, shaking her head. She was smiling, but it wasn't a kind smile. It was a knowing one, a cruel one. A knife flashed in the air. I felt it cut into me. My hands, my arms, my stomach. The pain, unbearable. And then, everything went black. I gasped, choked, sputtered. My body jerked, trying to fight against the suffocating darkness. Marlin's voice. I heard her up above like she was standing over me, her words disconnected, full of something sadistic. I'm sorry, but had this coming. You don't know anything. My truth. Your truth. The truth. You left me. 5 years is a long time. You did this to yourself, Keller. I opened my eyes again. The backyard. Marlin knelt beside me. Her blouse was soaked in crimson. I could smell it. Rust, iron. The shed was just yards away, the place where Andy's body lay. I tried to speak, tried to apologize, tried to explain myself, but no sound came. Even my dying breaths were barely audible. My vision faltered. I saw movement on the roof of the shed. 2 crows. There had never been a second note. No frantic packing, no chopping up Andy with a chainsaw, no shoving him into the trunk of the El Dorado. And then it hit me. The horror of it all, the truth that I had been running from, trying to escape. My chest tightened again. The world blurred, spinning, and then everything went black. Silent. Dark. I felt the vibration in my hand. Slowly, I opened my eyes. My cell phone was buzzing, the screen flickering with a name I hadn't seen in years. Marlin. I looked around. The carnival, the lights, the colors, music too loud, funnel cakes, crowds moving past me, laughing, talking, heading for the rides. I felt a light touch on my arm, and when I turned, I saw her, Marlin, standing there. She smiled at me, her eyes gleaming with something I couldn't place. She pointed up at the Ferris wheel, and I followed her gaze. The wheel squeaked as it turned slowly. We laughed together, our eyes meeting. The world felt simple again, just the 2 of us. No past, no regrets, just us. I glanced down at my cell phone. then back at Marlin. I held up the keys to the Cadillac, motioning toward it. She nodded, looping her arm through mine. Just us. No one left to blame. Story 6. I say let the world go to hell, but I should always have my tea. Summer 1992, 7th cup. The tea still works, even though it shifts and alters more than it should. My skin is tighter, I feel it around my chin and my collarbones, but it takes curious forms here and there, either too smooth or too sharp. The first time it happened, I barely noticed. I was blinded by relief, youth. I don't recognize my own reflection anymore. Now my patience wears thin where it once stretched long. My thoughts move too quickly and my moods shift without warning. The hours of morning I used to cherish agitate me. It's like I'm trapped in time, not freed from it. Next time I'll use more leaves, just to make sure. The walls are covered with vines that follow the delicate pattern of bricks, seeping through gaps in the mortar and peeking inside like intruders. The house stands like a forgotten relic, with its green tapestry of tendrils creeping along the windowsills, curling around the hinges and swaying gently in the breeze. Some vines have grown so thick they form a canopy over the sagging porch, casting shifting shadows on the creaking wooden floors. On the side, the chimney peeks out from the greenery, barely visible beneath the stubborn embrace of ivy. It's a house where nature has reclaimed its place, where the edges of time are blurred and cloudy. At the start of spring, the lilies flower, and through the door left ajar you can see a bouquet placed carefully on the table. If you turn right, through the air that carries the earthy scents of the vines, you'll find yourself in the parlor, where furniture sits like forgotten ghosts of another era. An armchair draped with quilt, a table so old its scratches look like wrinkles, books with cracked spines and yellowed pages scattered across a shelf leaning slightly to one side. Moss clings to the edges of the fireplace. From here you'd go through one of the two doors and end up in either the bedroom or the kitchen. The bed, centered in the middle of the room, has chipped paint coming off its iron frame. The blend of abandonment and charm that is the kitchen has mismatched jars of spices and dried herbs lined on shelves, and next to the sink, a cast iron kettle that rests on a stove, pulsing with a strange vitality. Its lid always seems to breathe with soft metallic sighs, an ancient creature that seems to know every secret whispered within the house. This altered slice of forest belongs entirely to me, Dorothy, an old lady whose only company is the house itself. I've lived here for as long as anyone can remember, a quiet but constant presence on the edge of the world. My wiry frame, draped in shawls, moves slowly through the vine-covered walls, my hands always stained with the green of crushed herbs or brewed teas. Depending on who tells the story, I might be a herbalist, a healer, or even a witch, but for those who don't like to indulge in the grasps of fiction, I'm just a lonely old woman. The solace I find in nature helps me cope with the sadness and grief brought by age. My thoughts often spiral into the past, replaying moments from my youth that are long gone. The forest becomes my refuge, a place where my grief feels less sharp, where I can lose myself in the rustling of leaves overhead. It makes me feel small in the most comforting sense, like a child again, cradled by something much larger than myself. Each time I am surrounded by the vibrant green and the hum of insects, I feel life and youth pumping through my veins. It makes something inside me ache, deep and primal. It is as if I want to consume the forest whole, swallow its wildness and vitality, and fill the hollow place within me that grief has carved. In this warm embrace, I can almost forget all the heaviness I carry. Almost. April 23rd, 1952. First cup. I don't know what to expect. Perhaps a little more energy and ease in my joints. I can see the plant standing outside my window, unfazed, as if it didn't just surrender something so life-changing to me. I don't expect miracles because that would be foolish. If I wake up tomorrow and feel the way I did 10 years ago, even 5, I'm at that age when even the slightest noise troubles my sleep. So when I hear the soft, almost rhythmic rustling, I get up immediately. It's not the sharp sound of wind, nor the familiar clattering of branches or leaves carried on the breeze. I stretch, my eyes still heavy with sleep, and gaze out through a gap in the curtains. There, growing just outside the window, is a plant nestled against the weathered stone wall, claiming the place as if it has always belonged. Except it didn't, I think. Its presence feels almost magical, with white blossoms that stand out like tiny stars, delicate and almost too perfect. I get my shawl and go outside to get a better look. The closer I step, the quicker my heart beats. As I pull my hand away from the plant, I feel an odd, sudden shift. Something within me has been gently untangled. I look down at my palm, and instead of the familiar creases that have accumulated over the years, I see skin so smooth, almost unmarked, as if just that part of my body has slipped away in time. The wrinkles, the evidence of age that has clung to me like a malady for so long, have vanished, replaced by the soft texture that I haven't known in decades. In the stillness of night, I can't help but wonder, has the plant done more than just grow? Has it reached into me and drawn something out, something almost rotten? And if yes, can it do it again? A strange surge of impulse sweeps over me. I reach toward one of its thick, twisting branches, curl my fingers around it, and with sudden determination and strength, snap it off. The leaves rustle in protest, but the plant itself makes no other sound, no objection, no struggle. Start off by boiling the water, 4 cups over medium-high heat, which you then pour over about 1 tablespoon of leaves and steep to the desired strength before straining. The quantity of leaves influences the end result. Taste, smell, years turned back. So beware. Add sugar if needed and stir until completely dissolved. Pour into a cup and drink. I set the teapot on the table and rest my hands on the worn surface. The silence in the room seems to stretch, as though the whole house is holding its breath. When I pour the hot liquid into my cup, the smell is sweet and inviting. Before lifting the cup to my lips, I let my gaze drift back to the smooth skin of my palm. It seems impossible, and for a second I think it might all be a dream, a mirage created by my sleeping self. But there it is again, the freshness of youth staring back at me, all too real. As I take my first slow sip, the light of dawn creeps through the curtains, casting a pale, golden glow across the room. A ray of sunlight slips past the table, past the jars with their faded labels covered in a layer of dust, and kisses the edge of the cup. After downing its contents, I can't help but smile. Years pass, the world shifts and reshapes itself. Time has forgiven nobody. It sheds its old skin and keeps emerging in a new form, always moving forward. Seasons mark their passing in the slow dance between life, death, and rebirth. The forest stirs from its slumber each spring, deepens its song in summer, catches its breath in autumn, and goes to sleep at last, in winter. Outside my house, the plant stands tall, its leaves shimmering in the sunlight, vibrant and green. It doesn't wither in the cold or droop in the heat, and while the trees around it shed their leaves, the plant turns a deeper shade of green, as if to mock the cycle of decay that governs everything else. Something so human, so terrestrial, this idea of age, is never a threat to its well-being. I witness these changes through both joy and sorrow. I am always there, a still point in a spinning universe. Each time I pluck a fresh leaf, I feel a rush of vitality fill me, the years peeling away from my skin. My reflection shows a face far younger than I have any right to possess. 1 cup, 2 cups, 3, 20, 100. It is easy to lose track of time. The cycle of day and night becomes meaningless. Days and hours and minutes are nothing compared to the eternity locked behind my eyes. Instead, I measure the passing of time by watching the plant diminish before my eyes, wondering how long it has left before turning into withered twigs. Will it one day simply stop growing altogether? Will I steal its essence until we both shrink, one no longer thriving at the other's expense? 132nd cup. I used to think highly of the plant, how time doesn't affect its leaves or flowers, but I'm not so sure anymore. The tea makes my stomach turn. I drink it anyway. What's the alternative? But every sip feels like a chore. I miss the sweet taste it once had. I don't even want to think about the possibility of it dying. Maybe it already is, and I just don't let myself see. The earth beneath my feet is dry and cracked, reflecting nothing but decay. Around me, the world is lifeless. Even the birds, creatures that once filled the mornings with their song, have long since vanished. Only silence remains. At the center of this desolation stands the plant, at least what is left of it. Its branches are brittle and twisted, no longer covered by the lush leaves that once crowned it in green splendor. I kneel before it one last time, my hands trembling as I reach out to touch the withered frame. I can feel it, the final breath of life, and I know in the ache of my bones, in the faint lines that have begun to reappear on my hands yet again, that this will be all over at last. Time, it seems, has finally caught up to me, and yet I can't resist taking this one more gift. Carefully, I pluck the final few leaves from the plant's skeletal frame, thin and fragile like paper soaked in water. In the kitchen, I light the fire and set the battered kettle on the stove. The water boils slowly, keeping the moment alive for just a while longer, this last ritual that I'm unwilling to let go of. I drop the leaves into the cup, watching as they unfurl, filling the air with the earthy scent tinged with a faint bitterness I can't recall. It smells of death. I carry the cup back to the garden, standing among the ruins of my once vibrant wood, the plant motionless behind me. I hesitate for a moment before raising the cup to my lips and drinking slowly. The warmth spreads through my body, but the feeling is different this time, heavier, less vibrant. My hands do not change, the lines on my face remain. The tea has nothing left to give. Behind me, the plant makes a soft, cracking sound, and when I turn, I see it collapse in on itself. Its branches curl inward, its roots shrink, pulling away from the earth until there is nothing left but a blackened patch of soil. It is gone, completely gone. As I stand in the silent, dead garden, I feel a strange sensation stir within my chest, faint at first and then growing stronger, deeper, spreading through my body like the vines on the house. When I clutch my arms, panic rising in my throat, I feel my skin softening, thinning, veins emerging beneath the surface like the ridges of a leaf. My legs tremble and I fall to my knees, the cracked earth beneath pressing into my bones. I can't rise back up no matter how hard I try. I am shrinking, folding into myself, rooting into the soil as if I am being claimed by it. Swallowed. My hair begins to tangle and grow wild, sprouting into long, twisting vines that cascade down my back and over my shoulders. I want to scream, but my words cut off, muffled by the sound of creaking wood emerging from my throat. It is as though the forest is taking back the very life I have drained from the plant over centuries. I have stolen, and now I must give. That is my last thought before my human form erases itself completely. I stand now, elegant and tall, my branches twisted upward toward the pale sky. I gave up on trying to regain my human beauty, but I mourn it still, while my leaves sway gently in the wind. From a distance I appear flawless, a vibrant plant in contrast to the barren garden. As you get closer, though, you start to notice the rot and ruin on the tips of my leaves, how they curl inwards, as if in their attempt to grow they lost their strength halfway. They whisper of a decay I cannot escape, no matter how deeply my roots have sunk into the soil. Story 7. Haiti, why can't we go into the woods again? I asked, my voice curious as I got into bed. I pulled the covers over myself as I lay down. My mother gave me a small smile and helped me settle in. The moonlight cast a soft glow through the window. The woods are very dangerous, she answered, sitting on the bed. And they hold a great evil within that preys on people. I looked at my mother with curious yet confused eyes. The Neki live there, she supplied at my look. The Nadi? I asked curiously, causing my mother to let out a small chuckle. Naki, she sounded out. They are water spirits that live within a lake at the center of the woods. They look friendly and beautiful, but they are not. They are shapeshifters that lure you to them. When you are within their grasp, they drag you down with them into the water where you can never leave. I gasped in shock at my mother's words. Never? I asked. Never. Once they have you, they eat you, she finished. My bright emerald green eyes were wide with fear. Promise me, Alexei, that you will never go into the woods, my mother fiercely asked, her own emerald eyes pleading. I looked at my mother. I promise, I told her. My mother gave me a kiss on my forehead and bid me good night. This legend of the Neki is one the mothers of Eldmere, Finland, have always told their children. Stay out of the woods, lest the Neki will take you away forever. As children, we held the legend with childlike contempt. They scared us enough to where we listened, but we were still children. We would tease each other at school the next day. One of us would pretend to be the Neki and chase the rest of us around at recess. As we grew older, we realized the legend was just a story, a fairy tale mothers told their children to make them behave and stay out of the woods. And as time went on, we stopped believing. Alexei, Gareth and Mackie are here, I heard my mother shout from the front door. I quickly stuffed the rest of my korvapusti into my mouth. Licking cinnamon off my fingers, I quickly grabbed my bag and headed to the front door. I could see my friends waiting at the bottom of the steps. I'll see you later, Eti, I said, giving her a quick kiss on the cheek. Before I could step out of the door, she grabbed me by the arm. Alexei. Yes? I sighed, already knowing what was about to happen. Gareth and Mackie looked up at us, also knowing, before heading to the end of the walkway. I turned my attention back to my mother. Have fun, she started. Her grip on my arm got tighter. And please do not go into the woods, she pleaded. I know, I told her, my voice coming out a bit harsh. She flinched slightly, causing me to sigh. Olen pahoilani, Eti, I said as I embraced her. She smiled softly and gave me a gentle pat on the cheek. I know you get tired of me telling you this, Poikani, but I just want you to be safe. I know, Eti, I promise, I told her. Her bright eyes searched mine for a second before nodding her head. I'll see you tomorrow, she told me. Giving her another kiss on the cheek, I left the house and walked towards my friends. Are you ready? Gareth asked, a wide smile on his face. His dark, russet brown eyes sparkled and his broad shoulders hummed in excitement. I looked at Mackie with a raised eyebrow, to which he shrugged his shoulders. You're pretty excited, huh? I asked as we walked down the road. The streets were slowly dying down as people packed up their vendors for the day and started making their way home. The sun's descent painted the sky with pink, orange, yellow, and purple. Of course I'm excited. This meteor shower is the most exciting thing to happen in this town since Mrs. Larty got caught sleeping with the mailman by her husband, he stated, causing Mackie to snicker beside me. You can't tell me you're not excited about seeing an actual meteor shower, Gareth stated, looking at me. I am, I told him. Eldmere was almost completely surrounded by woods and was a small town compared to others in Finland. With less than 300 people here and 3 stoplights, there wasn't much to do. He then looked at Mackie. With a roll of his cornflower blue eyes, he gave Gareth a nod. It is exciting, and it's nice to get out of the house, he told him. Is your mom still fighting with your sister? I asked him. When are they not fighting? He sighed. It's gotten even worse over the past couple of months with Ein's new boyfriend, who I'm pretty sure she's dating just to irritate Mum. Ein was a little over a year younger than Maki and had always been difficult. She seemed to crave getting into trouble. The arguing has gotten bad enough to where Dad has been staying in the den when he's not at work, though now it's more of Mom shouting and Ein ignoring her, he finished with another sigh. Well, this will be a good distraction, Gareth tells me with a pat on the back. It doesn't take us long to get to the creek. A bright burning fire flickers, lighting up the area. Music fills the air, and drunken teenagers stumble around. The sound of the rushing water can barely be heard over the excited shouts. A quick glance at my watch shows we still have about half an hour before the shower is supposed to start. We head over to the fire and relax, something we haven't really been able to do lately. I'm talking to a classmate when bright lights flicker across my sight, causing me to look up. The sound of excited cheers and shouts fills the air as the meteor shower begins. It is quite a beautiful sight. Streaks of light shoot across a star-filled sky. Wow, this is amazing, Maki states in wonder, the first genuine smile I've seen in weeks settling on his face. Before I can agree with him, I feel Gareth pull on my sleeve. Isn't that Ein with colour? He asks, pointing off to the side. Following his finger towards the creek, I spot the familiar long blonde hair of Ein. She's holding Callas, a teen of questionable motives, hand as they step into the creek. Are they going into the woods? I ask. Ein, Maki shouts, but she doesn't hear him. With a scowl on his face, he runs towards them. Gareth and I look at each other before chasing after him. By the time we reach the edge of the woods, the two teens have already disappeared inside. Maki shouts her name again, but there is no response. He takes a step forward, causing Gareth to grasp his arm. You're not seriously thinking about going into the woods? He asks, voice incredulous. Out of all of us, Gareth's mother is the most superstitious, driving into his head about the evil that lives within. I can't just leave her in there, especially not with him, Maki states. His voice is hard, but a tiny tremble reveals his fear. He's right, Gareth, I start, walking up beside Maki. Besides, the Neki is superstition, just something our mothers made up. We'll be fine. He still looks hesitant, but he steps forward with a nod. Together, the three of us enter the woods for the first time. The trees seem even more daunting up close. They stand tall, with moonlight filtering through their thick foliage. Our phones offer more light. As we walk through, a heavy sense of foreboding fills me. I feel like we've made a mistake entering the woods, but it's too late to turn back. Maki continues to yell for Ein, his voice echoing. The only other sound is the fallen leaves crunching under our feet. Am I the only one silently freaking out? Gareth whispers. I go to respond when I hear something. I quickly shush both of them and put a finger to my lips. A couple of seconds pass when I hear the sound again, a sound almost like screaming. My eyes lock with Maki's for a split second before he takes off. With a curse, we quickly follow him. The screams are getting closer and louder. Ein! Maki shouts loudly. Maki! She shouts in return, her voice right next to us. Suddenly, Gareth goes down as something collides with him. He groans as he lands on the ground with a thud. I quickly shine my light, revealing Gareth's pain-filled face and Ein's frightened one. Ein! Maki shouts, going towards her. He gathers her in his arms as sobs rock her frame. Leaves and twigs stick out of her wet hair. Mud and blood cake her pale face. There is a bleeding gash on her forehead, and small cuts litter her skin. Her clothes are torn, bloodied, and drenched in water. Ein, are you okay? Did Kala do this to you? Maki asks frantically. She shakes her head, her body still trembling. No, Kale didn't do this, she stutters out. I take off my jacket and wrap it around her shoulders. We have to get out of here. She tries to stand up, but her shaking legs force her back down again. Take it easy, Maki says. She grabs his arms in a fierce grip. We have to leave right now, she growls out. Her voice has stopped shaking. It's coming. Hein, what are you talking about? What happened to you? They're real. The Neki, they're real, she tells us. The last part a whisper. They can't be. It's a store. Maki replies. It killed Kala, she interrupts, casting us into silence. Dragged him into the lake, kicking and screaming, and tore him apart. She pulls down the collar of her shirt, revealing a deep bite mark that definitely does not look human. It almost got me, but I got away somehow. I look at Ein, not quite believing my ears. The story my mother always told me was real. Suddenly, an inhuman screech fills the air, causing us all to freeze. More screeches fill the air and are steadily growing in volume. It's coming, Ein whispers, her pale blue eyes widening in fear. I quickly help her stand, the screeches getting closer. Run, I shout. I grab Ein's hand and head in the opposite direction that she came from, Maki and Gareth right behind us. Bushes and low branches cut into my skin, but I pay them no mind, focused only on getting out of the woods. This can't be happening. This cannot be happening, I hear Gareth state in a breathless voice. We just have to make it out of the woods, I tell him when suddenly the screeching is right beside us. Before I can say anything, a black mass rushes at me, knocking me down. I feel pain as my body hits the ground. I'm disoriented at first, but my vision clears, revealing sharp teeth coming towards my face. I quickly kick my feet out, sending it away from me. Grabbing the closest thing to me, a thick stick, I scramble to my feet. The Neki has taken the shape of a beautiful, naked woman. Its hair is long, white, and drags upon the ground. Blood stains its pale skin, and its eyes are black as night. It flicks its attention between the four of us, as if deciding who to go after first. The dark orbs settle on Ein, and a cruel smile stretches across its face. With fingers clawed, it races towards her. I use the stick and smack the Neki across the face. Before it can get its bearing, I hit it again, forcing it back. I go to hit it once more when it grabs the end of the stick and rips it out of my hand. It then wraps its hand around my throat, lifting me into the air. I try to pry its hand off, but it is too strong. I hear Maki shout as he runs towards us with a stick of his own. The Neki easily knocks him away and brings its other hand towards my left arm. It takes my arm and brings it towards its mouth. I try to resist. Suddenly, pain shoots up my arm as the creature takes a bite. My scream fills my ears and the air. Taking its mouth away, the Neki looks at me with a blood-stained grin. Then it goes for my shoulder, its sharp teeth tearing into my skin. The pain is absolutely excruciating, and I can feel it through my entire body. My body weakens, and black spots fill my vision as it continues to feed from my flesh. The shouts of my friends echo in the background, but I know it's useless. I'm going to die tonight. All I can think about is my mother and the fact that she will be heartbroken. I'm sorry I didn't keep my promise, 80, I think, as I start to fade out. Suddenly, the teeth and pressure around my throat are lifted. As I fall to the ground, I gasp and cough as air rushes back into my lungs. A screech fills the air once again, but this one is filled with pain. Still weak, I can only lift my head a bit to see. Another screech reaches my ears, even louder and longer than the last. The Neki is on the ground with several arrows sticking out of it. Still screeching, it tries to crawl away, but another arrow finds it. This time it pierces what I believe to be its heart, causing it to go quiet. A sense of peace fills me at the creature's silence. I may be dying, but at the very least my friends will be okay. As I begin to black out, familiar emerald green eyes lock onto my own. The smell of lilac fills my nose, and soft hands caress my face. 80, I whisper. I see a small smile settle on her face. Olen Pahoy Lani, she states softly, tears running down her face. I told you to stay out of the woods. I know. I'm sorry, I tell her. Rest, she says. I close my eyes and surrender to the darkness. Story 8. Prelude. The rain pounded against the small stone home outside of the city of Corinth. The storm raged, and the winds howled, but I couldn't bring myself to acknowledge the storm's presence. All I could feel was the warm radiance of the god laying in bed next to me, his powerful arms wrapped around my body, making me feel safe and secure in the home. "You, more than any other mortal, have captured my heart," Zeus said sleepily, a smile on his face as he gently stroked the hair out of my face. "My heart is yours, now and forever, my lord," I replied, reaching up and kissing his face gently. I was the most beautiful woman in the village, my golden hair and sun-kissed skin making me desired by all. I was also known to be favored by the gods, most notably Zeus, who had arrived at my home in the midst of a storm similar to the one playing out now, in the guise of a giant eagle. "For you and only you, my love, I am not your lord, I am your love, as you are mine," Zeus replied, his muscular frame flexing under my soft touch as he moved his mane of curly black hair from his eyes. He found my lips with his own and began to kiss me softly at first, gradually becoming hungrier as we both felt the throes of passion overtake us once more. "So this is where you've been sneaking off to, my darling husband," a voice beckoned. We both jumped at the sound, and Zeus strode forward in the room, anger blooming in his eyes. "Who dares disrupt us?" he demanded, before recognition took hold in his eyes. "Do you not recognize your wife, O mighty Zeus?" Hera asked, stepping out of the shadows as her own golden glow began to radiate the room. Long flowing red and gold hair hung down her back, and the white sash she wore revealed her toned and athletic body, one bestowed upon all of the gods. "Hera, what is the meaning of this?" Zeus asked. "You have the audacity to feign anger at me, husband. You, who have left the world with more bastard children than can fill a temple in my honor? How ridiculous. And to debase your godhood by laying with this mere mortal. Why, that is beyond dishonor. You should feel shame." "Shame for what? For loving and being loved. You forget your place, Hera. I am the king of the gods, and you will show me the respect I deserve. Save the melodrama for when we return to Olympus. You and I both know that you and I have equal power. In fact, let me demonstrate," Hera replied, pushing past her husband and towards the bed, where I still held my white sash to my naked form. "My goddess, forgive me. I did not," I began to say, but my words fell short as I stared upon the beautiful goddess standing before me. "I'm sure you felt obliged to heed your feelings, especially in the presence of my divine husband here. Yet an example must be made, and you sadly must pay the price for my husband's mistake. I pity you, mortal. Your mortal life is now at an end, and only hell awaits you," Hera replied. With the simple touch of her hand to my forehead, my life changed forever. I howled in agony as pain took hold of me. I could feel my skin peeling and cracking in places, while my hair fell out and my bones cracked. My teeth sharpened and my ears grew pointed, and I felt my humanity shed off of me as easily as a wolf sheds its skin. "Zeus, my love, help me," I cried, my voice growing heavy and rough as my transformation continued. Zeus watched in horror as I twisted and turned into a hideous beast, and I could see the heartbreak in his eyes. Chapter 1. I woke to the bright light of a California morning streaming in through the blinds of the beach house. The soothing sound of the waves crashing on the shore nearby was relaxing, and I found myself fighting to stay awake. As I turned away from the bright morning light, I came face to face with Iris Walsh, my amazing girlfriend, and the world brightened once more. The weekend trip had come together perfectly. I'd surprised Iris with the weekend plans, and thankfully she had jumped at the opportunity. I needed a break from my latest novel, Baseline, and a weekend without answering another panicked call from my agent Helen was a welcome addition. Now in my 30s, I found myself drawn more to peaceful and romantic weekends rather than the party life that most 20-somethings craved for all week long. I'd been lucky to meet Iris in the first place. Iris Walsh was a 30-year-old photographer and makeup artist living in Los Angeles. I had been working on my book in a bookshop cafe and noticed her sitting at the table next to me. Her face was scrunched up as she studied something on her laptop, and I noticed she was drinking the same thing as me. I'd always been shy, so I hesitated to talk to her at first, unsure of what to say. As I worked on my book, I was surprised when Iris sat down on the couch next to me, setting her laptop down. I looked up to see her staring at me, and my heart immediately skipped a beat. Her emerald green eyes pulled me in, and for a moment, I couldn't think of anything else. "Sorry, the couch looked much more comfortable than the damn chair over there," she said, her Irish accent dancing in the air, teasing and enticing me like music. That's all right. Always plenty of room for a fellow vanilla latte drinker," I joked, hoping my face wasn't as flushed as I felt in that moment. I always felt awkward sitting next to a beautiful woman. As a heavy-set guy, I often worried that my appearance would be the only thing someone would fixate on when talking to me. Yet Iris was different. She never once broke eye contact with me. These vanilla lattes are delicious. I never had them back home, but damn, are they good. Is that an Irish accent I'm detecting? Where in Ireland are you from? Sandymount, a small village outside Dublin on the coast. Just moved here a couple years ago. Name's Iris Walsh, she introduced herself. Quinn Ford, I replied, and the rest was history, as they say. Now, as I looked into Iris's beautiful face and trailed my hand down her body, I could honestly say I'd never felt happier. Today was the day I had decided. Today, I was going to ask her to move in with me at my loft in LA. It had been a few months since we'd met, and she brought out the best in me. I just hoped she felt the same way, enough to say yes to the idea. "Good morning, darling," she said, smiling without opening her eyes. "How do you always know when I'm awake?" I asked, smiling back at her. "It's one of my superpowers, love," she replied, opening her eyes and smiling. "You are my superwoman. Did you get some good sleep?" "I always do when I'm next to you. What did you want to do today? Do you have to work?" "Nope. Today I'm all yours. I was thinking we could have a late breakfast, early lunch, lay on the beach, and then take a moonlit stroll along the beach before dinner. I thought we'd check out the caves near Pinnacles National Park. What do you say?" "I say that sounds like a plan. Want to take a shower first?" "You read my mind," I replied, following her out of bed as the sheets fell from our bodies and we ran into the bathroom, quickly shutting the door behind us. Chapter 2. It had been a whirlwind day for us. A hearty breakfast buffet followed by a long lounge on the beach in our bathing suits was the perfect way to spend the weekend. I could feel the anticipation building inside me, wanting the night to come so I could finally ask her to move in with me. My nerves were intense, but I kept telling myself that my instincts were right on this one. Yet as we lay together, Iris with her head on my chest, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was bothering her. At times, she felt distant, almost like her mind was 1,000 miles away, but I didn't let that deter me. Instead, I told myself I was just psyching myself out and needed to push forward with the plan I had set for the day. As night descended, we walked hand in hand along the trail of Pinnacles National Park. The waves crashed against the rocks nearby as I breathed in the ocean air. "Today has been the perfect day," Iris said, her smile stretching into a grin as she looked up into my eyes. "It really has been," I replied, leaning down to kiss her softly. Before either of us could say another word, the night air was pierced by the sound of a low growl. We froze, our hearts stopping as we turned to see a large pair of red eyes staring at us from the darkness of the trail we had just walked. "Iris, we have to move," I said, my voice shaky with fear. "Whatever that thing is, "It's blocking our path back to the car," she replied. "There's a cave nearby. If we can find some high ground in there, maybe whatever it is will move on. I don't have anything to fight it off with, so we have to take a chance," I said, urgency rising in my voice. "I feel like we're being cornered," Iris said, her voice trembling. "So do I, babe, but I don't think we have a choice. That thing is getting closer to us," I began to say. Before either of us could make a move, the creature stepped into the moonlight. We gasped in horror as a massive wolf, its tufts of black fur and pearly white teeth glistening in the light, walked toward us. Its eyes seemed to blaze with fire. Iris and I both turned to run, but as we did, we got caught on a large root, and the tumble sent us falling into the mouth of a cave below. I opened my eyes, and pain shot through the back of my head, stars exploding behind my eyelids as I slowly returned to consciousness. The world around me was blurry, but I could make out the outline of a large fire burning in front of me. I swatted at the cobwebs in my memory, trying to clear my head. As my vision started to clear, I realized I was lying inside of a large cave. I could still hear the crashing of the waves coming from the mouth of the cave, and the memory of being chased by the wolf flooded back to me in a rush. "Iris!" I shouted, trying to sit up, but another sharp pain shot through me. Before I could move again, a cold marble-like finger pressed gently against my lips. "Shh, hush now, babe. It's all right now," a soothing voice called out. I looked over and saw Iris crawling toward me. She looked like a vision of beauty as always. Her flowing white satin dress and porcelain skin seemed to glow in the firelight, and her piercing eyes held mine as she slowly climbed over me, straddling me and gently wiping the hair from my face. "Iris, are you all right?" My voice sounded distant, as though it were coming from far away. "We're both okay, my love. Just be here with me now," she said simply, before leaning down to kiss me. The kiss was powerful, ravenous even. I'd never felt such intensity from her. I felt weak in her presence. But as I looked into her eyes, something changed. They went from green to red, and the world around me crashed down. "You're not Iris," I said in shock, pushing the mystery woman off me and scrambling against the rock wall behind me. "More clever than most," she replied, her voice gravelly and a growl erupting from her throat. My heart raced as I watched Iris disappear, replaced by a hideous, monstrous crone. Her skin was split and cracked, her hair missing, and sharp yellow teeth pierced her lower lip. Her eyes blazed red, and her mouth began to unhinge, opening wide. A loud howl erupted from her, and my terror gripped me, freezing me in place. "Quinn!" a voice shouted. I turned to my right, relief flooding my chest when I saw Iris, my Iris, sitting a few feet away from me against the rock wall. The creature's attention snapped to her and it crawled toward her. Iris screamed as the creature closed in, its long, black, forked tongue slithering out to run down her face. The creature then pulled back, laughing a deep, sickening laugh as it glared at her. "I can smell it. The child has begun growing inside you," the creature hissed, still laughing. I stared in shock as Iris met my gaze, and tears streamed down her face. "I was planning on telling you at dinner. I was afraid you'd be scared off. We've only been dating a few months, and I thought the news would—" Iris started to explain, her voice trembling as tears hung like crystals at the corners of her eyes. "Iris, it's okay. That's the best news you could have ever given me," I said, my voice filled with emotion. "I was going to ask you to move in with me tonight. I guess your news trumps mine." I tried to joke, though tears and laughter mixed together as the horror of our situation sank deeper. "The child will make you a much more delicious meal," the creature sneered, unhinging its jaw once again. Iris screamed as it lunged toward her. I didn't think, I just acted. I threw myself forward, pushing Iris out of the way. The creature's teeth sank deep into my side as its claws shredded my chest. No! Iris screamed, but the creature released me and sent me hurtling to the ground. She crawled over to me, flipping me onto my back to check my face. Tears streamed down her cheeks, mixing with the blood pouring from my wounds. Why? Why would you do that? The creature asked, shock and awe in its voice. Because I love her. I love her. Love her enough to die for her. I gasped, my breath growing more shallow as the blood loss took its toll. The words I spoke seemed to pierce the night air, and suddenly the creature howled in agony, flinging itself to the ground as pain engulfed it. The creature's body began to shift, transforming in front of our eyes. Just as a brilliant light of white and gold filled the cavern, Iris shielded our eyes. A man stepped out of the light, a chiseled figure glowing with an otherworldly radiance. His piercing eyes scanned the room, taking in the scene before him. Who are you? Iris asked, her voice full of awe. You modern mortals would not believe me, but I am Zeus, the man replied, his voice like thunder. He leaned down as the creature before us continued to transform. The hideous form melted away, and a beautiful young woman appeared in its place. Iris watched in stunned silence as the creature vanished and Zeus gently wiped the blood from the woman's ruby lips. What is happening? Iris asked. You two mortals have freed my love,